With the release of E.T. in 1982, Dean Alioto knew all he wanted to do was direct. He told family members of his ambitions and was dead set on making a movie. At 24 years of age, he just had to make a movie by the time he was 25. I mean, his heroes like Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and Orson Welles did, but how would he go about it? With his interest dead set on the sci-fi genre and a keen interest in alien abduction lore, having been influenced by books like Communion, The Case of the Betty and Barney Hill Abduction, and the Stephen King novel Desperation, he knew where he wanted to start. Dean was able to convince a friend to throw in $6,500 to help him make a film, but he knew with such little money there wasn't much he was going to be able to do. It wasn't until a flight back to LA that it dawned on him. What if this was the last time he was seeing Earth? What if, at that exact moment, he's actually being taken away by some unknown being from another world? With this thought weighing on his mind, he came up with doing a combination of 10 Little Indians and War of the Worlds, except on video. War of the Worlds is the classic H.G. Wells story about visitors from space coming to Earth on a mission of conquest, while 10 Little Indians is a mystery whodunit, where characters are killed off one by one until the mystery of the killer is revealed at the end. The book is often cited as being responsible for starting the slasher craze of the 1980s, with films like Friday the 13th taking great inspiration. Dean began writing his new film about visitors from space, and once he had a 20-page treatment of what would become his film, he began casting. They held a casting call, and since most of the film would require the actors to think on their feet, they looked for anyone with a background in improv. They ended up with a group of actors who actually never did anything like this before, so it was gonna be kind of a challenge. Well, except for the little girl. She was a natural, and everyone else, well, they had to play catch-up. With the script and actors lined up, the next part was creating the alien spaceship itself, along with the 3 aliens. Dean reached out to a friend he made out in Sacramento, a man named Bill Bowes. Bill Bowes is an art director, special effects guy, production designer, you name it. Dean showed him drawings and samples of how he wanted the aliens and the ship to look, and told him his budget was only $750. Dean feared Bill may turn the project down, but luckily for Dean, he came aboard. Bill built the ship with foam triangles and gave it an almost egg-like shape. With the right lighting and some smoke though, the whole thing came together. As for the aliens, they were based on actual eyewitness testimony by people that claimed to have experienced encounters with extraterrestrials, along with a TV movie called Interrupted Journey from 1975 that chronicled one of the most popular abduction cases in UFO lore, the Betty and Barney Hill Abduction. The aliens were given large heads with soulless black eyes. They had to be short and slim, so they hired 3 8-year-old girls to play the creatures from space. The 3 girls spent a lot of time wandering out in the dark, which gave some concern to the filmmaker over how scared they may be, but the girls were real troopers. When filming began on the movie, it wasn't filmed like a typical movie. Most films are shot out of sequence and then are put together in the editing room. Here, the scenes were set up like dominoes, with each scene set to be filmed right after the previous. This was done so the actors would have a sense of real time, like they were actually going through the night themselves, and almost like the whole production was a stage play. Rehearsals took roughly a week around San Francisco, with the actors running away from fake aliens, while neighbors watched them like they were crazy people. The film was shot in Northern California, at a cabin up on the hills that they paid $100 to shoot in. Dean placed himself in the role of the cameraman Michael, the middle child, so he could make sure they got the proper coverage and framing for the shoot. While Dean was filming the scenes, he would also communicate with cast and crew, giving cues for what the shot would need. He would turn his head and cue the aliens, or cue the lights, all the while still filming the scene. This gave him more control over what he wanted, and if he felt the actors weren't at the intensity he needed, he would get that out of them by acting more intense himself, or being more calm and collected when he needed the scene to be a bit more quiet. Once filming was finished, Dean had to find a distributor for his film. He really wanted his film to hit the direct-to-video market because he was hoping he could make some money there, which he would then in turn use to fund his next project. The late 1980s and early 90s were filled with direct-to-video labels, so he had a lot of options. It's unknown the exact distributor he went with, but only months after handing the film over to them, their entire company burned to the ground in a fire, including Dean's film. Though nothing has been proven, Dean believes it was most likely for insurance reasons. At this point though, Dean thought his movie was gone for good. The artwork, the master, all went up in the blaze. That was until 1994 when a man by the name of Sean Morton, who represented shows like Hard Copy, Encounters, and Unsolved Mysteries called Dean asking if he knew anything about the found footage, a term that up until that point wasn't really known and may even be the first time it had ever been referenced. Sean told him they found some footage about aliens that all these shows wanted to get their hands on and if he knew anything about it. Dean of course told him that it was his film. Dean learned that since the time of the fire, a few copies of his film were sent to mom and pop shops as a promotional thing, and someone got their hands on it, chopped off the opening and closing credits, and passed it off as a real alien abduction within the UFO community. The altered tape made its way to the International UFO Congress Convention in Las Vegas in 1993, and there it shocked and awed everyone who saw it. But as soon as Dean revealed that he made the film, Unsolved Mysteries quickly pulled out. Hard Copy and Encounters were still interested in the footage, and Dean ended up going with Encounters, which were going to use it as the world's greatest UFO hoax. Dean appeared on the show and everyone went nuts over it. He would even get calls from people that wanted him to help stop alien abductions from happening. Even though the footage was shown to be a fake, it didn't matter. Dean was interviewed for Encounters along with 2 UFO researchers, Tom Dongo and Lieutenant Colonel Donald Ware, and despite Dean telling everyone this was just a film that he released, those within the UFO community still believed it to be proof of an actual alien abduction. UFO Abduction follows the Van Hees family as they celebrate the birthday of the youngest member, Little Michelle. Michael, played by director Dean Alioto, has just gotten a brand new camera and is using it to document the family get-together. The actors all feel really natural, and it looks like some of my own home videos from family gatherings when I grew up. After the birthday girl blows out her candles, the family notices the lights won't turn back on. The 3 brothers, Michael, Eric, and Jason, go outside to check the fuse box when a strange red light passes overhead. So the 3 men decide to check out just whatever the hell that was. In order to make it as real feeling as possible, the director has his character shut off the light on his camera to save battery power, because he thought people would begin to question the authenticity of the video if the camera were going with the lights and everything on without the battery dying. This is when the 3 men discover some kind of craft off in the distance, but it's not only the craft they discover, but also its occupants. The aliens notice and look right at the brothers, and that's when they decide it's about time to leave. They return home in a panic, telling the rest of the family that they saw what they can only describe as aliens. Jason and Eric arm themselves with shotguns in case the visitors followed them back to the home. The rest of the family pretty much mocks them, which is understandable because if someone told you that they saw an alien spaceship, would you believe them right away? That same red flash from earlier appears in a window, so either the visitors left or they've come for the family. The family breathes a sigh of relief, thinking the visitors must have left, so they get back to cake and present opening. Everything seems all fine until Michael finds a picture little Michelle drew of what looks to be one of the aliens. She points to the window claiming that's where she saw it when one of them is peering through. One of the brothers, and it's honestly hard to figure out who is who, ends up shooting and killing one of the aliens. Eric does the really smart thing and brings the body of the alien into the home and puts it in one of the bedrooms. Eric and Jason both leave to get help or something, but they end up taking the only guns in the house, while the rest of the family waits with a dead alien in the bedroom. But when the family notices they never hear the truck leave, they find Jason's gun, and no sign of either Eric or Jason. The family believes the 2 men may have walked for help if the truck wasn't working, but why would they leave behind their guns? They start to play cards when one of the women tries to leave the home like she was sleepwalking or something. Michael decides to check on the alien in the bedroom, only to find that it's gone. The family starts to freak out when they tell Michael to put his camera down, which he does, but he needs to make sure it's just in the right spot so they can get the final shots for the film. This is when the aliens make their entrance into the home and the film abruptly ends with screams. Now this copy is a little more cleaned up, and you can obviously tell that these are just children, but a crappy VHS copy could do wonders to hide some of these flaws. Also, finding this tape with no credits or anything to signify that it's just a movie could be rather unsettling. Throughout the movie, there are little glitches here and there in the camera footage, something that would become a trope with found footage movies in the future. Whether it started here is unclear, but this is most likely where that idea came from. In 1998, 1 year prior to the release of the hit indie film The Blair Witch Project, a remake of UFO Abduction would come out called Alien Abduction: Incident in Lake County. It was again directed by Dean Alioto and originally aired on UPN on January 18, 1998. Around 1995, Dean was working on a show called US Customs Classified when a writer on the show wanted to see his little alien film. Dean was apprehensive and a little embarrassed about the whole thing, but showed it to the writer, and the next day they were set up with a meeting at Dick Clark Productions. They met with Neil Stearns, who was at the time head of the TV department. Nothing was said between the parties. Instead, they showed a small part of the encounter segment Dean was in, and they immediately shook hands on a movie deal. It was originally going to be made through Showtime, but wound up at UPN with a budget of around $1.5 million, which is a substantial increase when compared to the paltry $6,500 he had for the first film. The remake would be filmed in Vancouver, and they had some of the crew from The X-Files come over and build the spaceship and alien costumes. Dean co-wrote and directed the film alongside his partner, Paul Chitlick, and they somehow came in $500,000 under the budget when all was said and done. The original title for the remake is The McPherson Tape because the family involved are named the McPhersons and because McPherson has the pronunciation of fear within it. Once the film got in the hands of UPN, however, they changed the title to The Bland Alien Abduction Incident in Lake County. Throwing some more confusion into the titles of both movies, the original UFO Abduction is often named The McPherson Tape, and that's usually what it's named when searching for it online or even in its actual DVD release. The casting for the remake was a bit different than for the original. Since this is a Hollywood production, you couldn't just hire anyone off the street. Also, because it was Hollywood, the cast had to be on the more attractive side of things. One of the hardest things was getting the cast to turn their back to the camera. Most actors want to have their face shown at all times, but this was a different kind of production. It had to feel real and natural. Even though this was a TV production, they wanted to include things like profanity and even some nudity because Dean thought it would help make it all feel more authentic. The swearing I can understand given the situation the characters will be in, but the nudity just feels exploitive and unnecessary, especially considering it's going to be blurred and bleeped out respectively. Actress Emmanuelle Shrieky was hired on for the part and knew going in that it would require her to do some nudity. The night of the shoot, however, she got cold feet and no longer wanted to do it, despite signing a contract saying that she would. Dean, knowing his actress felt uncomfortable, but knowing full well he needed the shot to pull off the reality of the situation, he compromised with the 22-year-old actress and told her she could wear skin-colored pasties that would give the illusion that she's topless, but not actually show anything, which she was willing to do, and it seemed to work out perfectly for the shot. For this version of the movie, there were two cuts. A North American version, not including Canada, that was an hour long, and a 2-hour version for the rest of the world, which included interview segments from various professionals in different fields who would give off their own perspective as to whether they thought the footage was real or not. One of the experts is actually the director himself, playing a filmmaker named Damien Hawkins, basically giving him an excuse to gush about his own movie within his own movie.
If it is a hoax, I should have been the one that directed it.
The original film was something he just did on his own, but now he had to work within the confines of the studio system. But much to Dean's surprise, they were actually rather supportive. He even suggested that they just save some money and show his original film, but they insisted he do an updated version. Everything went well for the most part until halfway through the middle of the shoot, nearly everyone at UPN got fired. Their one saving grace was the head of the TV department, who still remained, and he wound up being their only inside man from then on. The new regime took a look at what the team had been doing and thought it was a huge pile of garbage. They ended up kicking everyone off the project and bringing in their own people to cut it down from 2 hours to 1. The network aired it and it came back with the highest ratings for a Tuesday night. So they added more footage and showed it again, only for it to get even higher ratings. The new head of the network, who had trashed the whole thing, said it would never be shown again because he was apparently furious with how well it did despite what he thought about it. After the release of the remake, weird conspiracies started floating around the internet that Dean worked for the government, and that the original film was real and this new updated version was part of some elaborate act of disinformation. Dean would also get a lot of fan mail from people who were young kids at the time of its release, telling him how they couldn't sleep at night. One woman even said she nearly had a miscarriage because of how terrified she was. When this TV movie came out, I was 11 years old. I saw it with my cousins the night it aired, and it scared the shit out of me. I always had a fascination with aliens and UFOs, and I completely bought into this thing being a real, actual alien abduction caught on film. I actually didn't even know about the original film's existence until a few years ago when I was searching for this one online and found out that it was actually a remake. Although being older and seeing this through different eyes, it's funny to see what my younger self just couldn't. This version is largely the same for the most part, opening with a viewer discretion for what is being claimed to be actual footage of an alien abduction. This version follows the McPherson family as they celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. The problem when making a found footage film is it loses any of its realism if you use known actors. Now, the actors in this film may not have been well known, but they also don't feel like real people when compared to the first film. For example, the mother/grandmother in this version had already appeared in 4 X-Files episodes by the time this came out. So for viewers of that show, she may have seemed familiar. The middle child Tommy is the one doing the recording of the Thanksgiving festivities when older brother Kurt asks him to find his brother Brian and his girlfriend Renee. This is where we get the nude scene that was so integral to the story. As the family gets ready to eat, the power goes out and a flashing light can be seen outside. Their sister Melanie arrives with her new boyfriend Matthew, and for some reason they introduce racial tension between the older brother Kurt and Matthew, because I guess they had to create some more drama besides aliens, but it just comes off as lazy. After checking the fuse box, which looks like it got fried, the 3 brothers see a flash of light in the distance and head off to investigate. Like in the original, they find what looks to be a spaceship, however the camera in this version tends to have more static and issues than in the original, most likely to hide how cheap everything looked. Because of the higher budget for this film, they're able to have some more special effects, so the aliens in this one are actually mutilating cattle with a laser, which is a popular part of alien lore. After this, the men are spotted by the aliens and now have to make a run back to the house. When they return, their family obviously doesn't believe a word that they say and just want to enjoy their meal. The good times are ruined when one of the aliens walks by the window, forcing Kurt and Brian to grab some shotguns. There's a complete shift in tone from the family members after they play back the footage so the others can see what the brothers encountered. Tommy and Kurt go outside to grab the truck so they can get everyone out of the house, but the aliens got to it before they could. One of the aliens manages to get in the house through an upstairs window, so Kurt checks it out with his shotgun. Tommy decides to leave his brother and go to his room to change his pants because he peed himself earlier in fear, only to come face to face with one of the aliens. For some reason, it just leaves him alone and exits the room when older brother Kurt ends up locking the alien in another room. Suddenly, the alien fires a laser through the door, so Kurt responds by shooting the shotgun in retaliation. They place a bookcase in front of the door just in case the alien isn't dead. Following that, some spooky red orb flies around the room, and some expert talks about how you couldn't fake this in camera. I remember telling friends at school that there was no way they could have faked this part and that it just had to be real. One of the brothers' girlfriends ends up having a seizure, while the little girl Rosie, who's been acting kind of odd this whole time, is trying to free the alien from the bedroom. Brian and Kurt leave again because they've had so much luck with the previous few attempts. The mom tries to get everyone to sit down and eat something, but no one has an appetite, and who could blame them? It's highly unlikely, but there's a similar scene in the film Signs where the family sits to have one last meal together before the aliens arrive, and I'm wondering if this film or the original inspired that scene. After what sounds like a gunshot and more flashing red lights, things get weirder when Matthew starts making out with the sister that isn't his girlfriend right in front of everyone, and little Rosie suddenly knows how to play the piano. She also removes and hides shells from a shotgun when everyone has left the room, including Tommy, who went to get a new battery for the camera. At some point though, the bookcase was moved and the alien is back on the loose. Matthew gets tired of waiting for the other men to return, so he decides to grab his car and swing back to pick everyone up. But he disappears just as quickly as he left. The remaining family members run out to the truck, only to find no sign of the men, but their guns have been destroyed. There's suddenly a bright red light in the distance as the aliens start to move in on the family. The remaining family members make it back inside, where Rosie starts passing out playing cards to the family members. Tommy then gives a confessional about what the family is going through, a staple of modern found footage films that again may have started with this film. Tommy then puts the camera down in similar fashion that Michael did in the original film while they play a game of Go Fish. This is when the aliens enter the home and the family just seem to willingly go with them, like they're under some kind of spell. The original film just ended with screams and it finished, but here, the family just goes along with it. After the special was shown, it stirred up a bit of controversy akin to the panic that the old War of the Worlds radio broadcast had stirred up some 60 years prior. Because at the time, found footage films weren't really well known. Many people thought the whole thing was real. Close to 50% of the viewers who watched it, in fact. The funniest part of all of this is at the end of the special there were credits showing who played who, including the 4 aliens. For some reason though, in New Zealand, the end credits revealing everything to be a fake was cut off, leading many to still think it to be real. The weird thing with the remake is that even though it technically has more seasoned actors, the actors in the original film felt more real and organic. The footage of the get-together in the beginning looked like almost any family get-together in the 1980s, while this updated version felt more like a show. Sure, they could fool 11-year-olds like me that were obsessed with alien lore, but anyone smart enough could have seen right through it. Both UFO Abduction and the McPherson Tape, or Incident in Lake County, whatever you want to call these films, are an interesting stop note in the found footage horror subgenre. Both films have largely become forgotten over the years, especially when they were overshadowed with the release of the Blair Witch Project, which drew a media firestorm. While UFO Abduction does have a DVD and Blu-ray release under the McPherson Tape name, Incident in Lake County has yet to receive the same. Director Dean Alioto is hoping to one day release Incident in Lake County with UFO Abduction added as a special feature. But for the time being, if you'd like to see Incident in Lake County, the best you'll be able to find are low-quality VHS rips on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed our look at two seemingly forgotten found footage films. Have you seen either film? Did you watch the remake when it was shown on TV? If you have, I would love to know what you thought. Anyways, that's all for me. I hope you're all having a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.